Welcome to this 66th edition of ClariTea Chat. Here we have Suresh Iyer with us, CIO of Blue Star Limited. Hi, Suresh. Welcome to
Hi,
ClariTea Chat.
Jagdish. Hi. Cheers, buddy. And
Cheers,
a
man.
pleasure to be here with you.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all mine, us, though. But just to get started, one sentence that defines Suresh is like growth comes with experiments and saying yes to a varied set of opportunities. Suresh, just to introduce Suresh, he comes from a humble middle class family who always put education as their first priority. He's an alumnus of Mumbai University. He has done stints on both sides of technology, from a services point of view as a CIO, as well as in diverse geographies and industries. And that gives him a unique, holistic perspective of leveraging technology, for success from both sides. So he has driven many transformational initiatives to develop digital capabilities for Blue Star's ecosystem, um, and he has met various challenges thrown at him, around with the philosophy of customer centricity and aligning business with technology. So we'll get to hear it in detail as to how it was shaped and how he has managed. And as always, we bring in these management styles and philosophies from our leaders. So just a quick peek into our chat with Suresh. So we'll cover delivering beyond expectations, managing client relationships, design thinking, turning around adoption of technologies with that, and learning business and customer centricity just by being in the field of action. So, in Blue Star, his philosophy has been that first connect the organization, then connect the ecosystem, and we'll know more as we go through it. We'll end the chat with a rapid fire round to bring out the personal side of Suresh. So, if there are any curiosities you have which are unfulfilled by the end of the session, you can ask them in the rapid fire. And then there will be a reverse question from Suresh to me. So, Suresh, before we start talking of serious things, let's get some energy going up. So, please share the story of project management in your honeymoon.
Jagdish, you had to bring that up, right? Um, you should ask
Absolutely.
my wife about this particular angle. Okay. I think I was a very arrogant project manager in my early days, pretty much successful. I'd practiced project management, almost everything, all the principles, I'd learned everything. And I decided to do it for honeymoon as well. And I thought I'd laid out the perfect plan for our honeymoon, all the best places to go to, the best modes of transportation, everything. I thought it would be great. But it was the disaster of my life, I think. And we wound up, going to all over the place. In fact, we were spending more times in planes, buses, and trains than in hotel rooms, which is what one would do in a honeymoon, I would guess, or rather, most people would. Okay. And we were literally going and coming back to the same place, which was a hub for us, which I thought would work out wonderfully because we had some place to come to and then go across to some other location. But it turned out to be a nightmare, and thanks to some seasonal rainfall, unseasonal rainfall rather, there was a lot of flooding and everything, which further compounded our problems. I think the expression on my wife's face said it all on the day we came back home, and that was the last time I think I've ever done planning for any trip which we take together. Okay. So that is something which I will never forget, and perhaps that also helped me further on my project management skills, whatever extent.
So I think it was like a bad mix up of your personal and professional lives at a very crucial
Yeah,
time.
yeah, never again, never again.
Yeah. But that's very interesting one. Thanks, Suresh, for sharing that. Um, but that personal side of you trying to bring in project management in your married life and messing it up. Okay, so I can already see a lot of comments here from the audience. So let's quickly go over to them. So we have Suresh. In our audience we have CXOs, founders, IT managers, and seasoned technology industry leaders, and all of us know that technology is necessary but not sufficient to drive business outcomes. Now, guests like you on our Clarity Chat have built the bridges, and have learned the art of managing the bridge between the necessary and sufficient. And that's what we are here to learn from. And of course, not in a boring yarn way, but sharing through experiences and case studies. So thank you everyone for joining us for almost 66 weeks now, and encouraging us with your interactions and engagement. So let's see who we have here. But before I do that, um, I request our audience to share your name and where you are joining from in the comment box of LinkedIn or YouTube. So let us see who all have joined here. So we have, okay, as always, our first audience is Amarinder Singh. Hey, Amarinder, thank you. Happy Onam. Wishes to you too. He says hi to you, Suresh.
Hey, happy Onam.
Then we have Dattatreya joining from Oman, and we have Rajesh Borde. He's from HP. We have Sunil Punjabi from Tech Mahindra. I know many of these guys, just because of Clarity Chat. And we have Birendra Devi Ram. Good evening, Birendra. We have Nikhil Joshi. Happy Onam, Nikhil. And we also have Vijay Sethi. Here we see him as a LinkedIn user, but by Amrinder's comment, I know that this is Vijay sir. Thank you, Vijay sir, for joining us.
Hi, Vijay. How are you? Well, of course, you may not be able to answer me, but good to see you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so now let's begin the session, Suresh. Let's begin with a quick recap of your childhood. Tell us how it was like, growing up as a child, what kind of family and what kind of background, and what was that foundation that was laid for you to be what you are today.
Childhood was it was very tough in one way, but also very, very enjoyable as well. Okay. Threw up a lot of challenges, primarily because, well, we were all in a very lower middle class in those days, I would say, rather than upper or middle class itself. There were six of us cooked up in a one room kitchen, literally, and we used to have guests constantly coming because people would always use us as a standby or layover before they would go into their own. Okay, so a lot of relatives coming in. So we always were full, and but we didn't mind it at all. Okay, I think we had all the hardships which one would face, thanks to the fact that only my father was the breadwinner and he had to make ends meet for almost all of us. So life was frugal, but it did teach us how to cope with it, how to manage with what we have, and also harden ourselves up to accept what is there rather than look for what is not there or what is not reachable. Okay. So all in all, it was a pretty good childhood, and we were staying in a place where there were people around us who were equally in the same situation, but because of that, a lot of camaraderie was there and a lot of togetherness, which made the whole journey of childhood a much, or a rather very pleasant experience. I don't think I would change it at all. I think I had a very good childhood considering everything. And frankly speaking, it was thoroughly enjoyable and perhaps livable once more.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, talk to us about your education and your graduation and the first job.
Sure. You know something, this my childhood was, or rather my schooling was done in a convent in Vilaypale, Mumbai. Okay, so I passed out of there. It's called St. Xavier's School. I was a pretty average student, in fact, below average most of the time. I was not used to studying. And somehow I managed to score some pretty decent marks in 10, which was a surprise to everybody. Most of all to me and my parents as well, because nobody really expected me to score that high. And that perhaps gave everybody the confidence that I may be a good engineering candidate. Okay. And that was a myth, to be honest. I think 11th and 12th, I did in a college in Vilaypale. I was enrolled in the science stream. I had the fun of my life. Okay, it's like I never had a any fun in my earlier days, so I sort of made up for it. But unfortunately, 12th results were nowhere close to expectations, and therefore I found myself doing my BSc, which I did with physics. Luckily, I did focus on that, and I was able to then go on and do my BSc Tech in computer technology. So, education finally yielded me what I wanted and gave me the base in which I could move forward and sort of get into my passion area, which is fundamentally computers or software to be precise. So, one thing which I know about my childhood, one which I should perhaps mention is, see, some of the things which I use now were more or less ingrained then. I had to keep using my school uniforms. I recycle it, or rather reuse it every year for quite some years. And luckily, I didn't grow as fast. And that was where the concept of reusability was perhaps ingrained into me. Okay. And then because we were living frugally, optimization became another virtue which we sort of, got it built into us. And that is where I find a lot of things shaping up because of that sound foundation there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So maybe like a quick two or three takeaways from here. One is like a humble childhood, but then learning the values of frugality, learning the values of optimization. By the way, just to share with you, when I was doing my 11th and 12th, I had two uniforms and I think two private dresses, as we used to call it, right? I mean, for going to the market and all, and two sweaters. And I was like very clear that unless I make it to engineering, I'm not going to ask for my dad for another set of clothes. He
Yeah.
would ask me every time, and I would say, "Yeah, thoda wait karte hain." He asked me a few times, then he stopped asking, and then after I cleared my engineering and all, I went to him and I said, "Chalo, kapde kharidte hain. Let's go."
Well, luckily, my father didn't have the luxury of asking me. Okay, so that was how bad it was. But I'm telling you, it was fabulous. I don't think anything could be able to
Absolutely.
be better.
Yeah. I mean, like so my this thing was just like delayed gratification. So I learned delayed gratification, that like do something and then kind of gratify yourself rather than like
Yeah,
just going by your whims and fancies. Well,
absolutely.
so great, Suresh. I think that sets us up for your career journey now. Your different stints and one big takeaway from each of those stints, and maybe like what kind of places you went, what kind of technologies, what kind of industries, just to give our audience a mind map of like what all Suresh has gone through before he came here.
Sure. So, as I take it to you, I passed out the graduation in engineering, primarily in computer technology in 1988. And part of that was an internship. So, I joined a firm called Link Software, which was a very small boutique product firm doing software solutions for the in the finance and accounting space for the travel and hospitality and medical or other hospitals. Okay, so we were actually having products which used to reside in those floppy disks, and it was an amazing journey. It was an amazing start because I had really good people who were very good in both software development as well as entrepreneurship. Okay, and they were you basically get to do everything then. Okay, you're not just slotted into a software programming role or a maintenance role. Here you have to do everything. You have to set it up, you have to go for implementation, you have to go and do requirement studies, you have to go and do troubleshooting, you have to fix the hardware if required. So fundamentally it was a journey of 2 years which taught me anything and everything which one could potentially learn about computers and software. Post that, I went into Blue Star Limited. Blue Star Limited in those days, this was the time when software exports were picking up in India. Okay, and SEEPs was the place where it was all happening. So wanted to get desperately into SEEPs because every one of my friends was going there in those days, and that was where most of the companies were also setting up shop. So Blue Star Limited was one such company. They had an international software division which was primarily doing software exports, and it was different from the other lines of business even in those days. And I came in, got interviewed, got selected, and after 6 months, I was in the US working on some client assignments. In those days, it was all about HP 3000. That was one of the platforms which Blue Star was building a lot of capabilities on, and it was a workhorse for many manufacturing and even insurance firms to a large extent. One of those computers which typically gets tucked away in the corner, you can forget about it, but it keeps working. It's an amazing product from HP, and I still have very good memories of it. So I joined that, did a lot of assignments in the US, traveled to Malaysia, traveled to Singapore, traveled to UK, Europe, saw pretty much parts of most of those countries in those days which were leveraging India for a lot of software related work. Okay, Blue Star Limited eventually became, this particular division was then spawned off into a separate company called Blue Star Infotech in 2000. So I became a part of that. And in this period when I was there till 2003, I had a very phenomenal journey, frankly speaking, because I did everything. I had HP 3000. I was working on those kind of technologies. I was working on embedded. I was working on a number of other areas as well. I was doing sales. So learned quite a lot about how to deal with customers right at that point. Okay, because this is where we used to work very closely with them, and being a part of the sales org also helped me understand a lot more as to what customers expect. Okay, post that, because I'd spent 14 years, I thought might as well make a small change in my life to see what other companies are doing. So I joined Mastech. Mastech was also in Seeps, and there but I was there for 1.5 years. But again, it was an amazing part because I was part of an engagement which taught me, this is where customer centricity as a concept was ingrained into me. And Mastech, being a very employee friendly organization, typically gives you a lot of freedom to operate as well. And that perhaps encouraged me to do a lot of things in this realm of customer management. And it was an amazing journey right there and helped me do a lot with a particular customer there. Post that, I was asked to come back to Blue Star Infotech, and I was given the position of a corporate marketing head. Of course, something which I never knew anything about. I had never understood the word marketing or never even looked it up. Although I did sales, but corporate marketing was a different animal. But I was game, took it up, and then I also headed the delivery function there subsequently, which was over 1,000 people at that time. Eventually, after that, I moved to back to the parent, which is Blue Star Limited, which is in the current role of CIO. So in each of these, as in each of these parts, I think I got something out of it, and frankly speaking, it has helped me put together what I am today. Okay, and in my current stint, it's all about managing expectations, managing users, and delivering value. So the a summation of whatever I learned led to these three attributes which I constantly practice. So I think it's been a, I come back, I spent literally a lot of time in Blue Star itself, so pretty much feel a part of that. It's very much part of my bloodstream, I would say. So that's
Absolutely.
been
But
life.
yeah, so you see, even though it was Blue Star, but I think different functions and being on the
Correct.
both sides. So let me summarize it. For our audience. So started from a small company, because it was a small company doing everything and becoming an all-rounder and learning everything. I think that was a good setup, I would say,
So
Suresh.
it was. It was
Um,
very fruitful.
yeah, absolutely. So to all of you out there, like who are who kind of get starry-eyed about working in these large companies, there's a different value in working for small companies and startups, which is that you get a lot of exposure around. The second is like the second takeaway is a good well-rounded exposure of different geographies: India, US, Malaysia, Singapore, etc. And then like different functions, whether it's sales or delivery, etc. And then I really picked up on the leadership identifying you for the corporate marketing role, where you were not a career marketing guy. And I think this is a um, sort of an example, where somebody sees a potential in you, which you yourself may not realize, and just saying yes. And that was like how I opened the session, that just saying yes
Correct.
to new opportunities, even though you don't know, even though you haven't done anything before. I think that brings in a lot of learning and a lot of learning and growth for and evolution for you. And yeah, finally, the CIO role, converging all of these learnings together, managing expectations, managing value, and customer centricity. So, Suresh, I know you were picking up like things that you didn't know, etc., etc. So let's dive a little deeper into the first part of your experience, where you were learning and unlearning technologies, even as the technology world was changing fast. So I'm sure these experiences shaped your wide-angled view of business and technology. Talk to us through some examples and some of your stories. from a career.
Yeah. See, one of the things which I gained as a reputation was, or with all my managers and with whoever I interacted, including my customers, was that of a troubleshooter. Okay. Fundamentally, a person who could you could trust to fix anything, irrespective of whether he's got the skills or not. And somewhere, I built up that kind of a reputation, and that sort of helped me in every single thing which I did subsequently as well. So, as I said, I started off working on a COBOL platform on PCs, which moved on to HP 3000, where I moved into a networked database system and a certain 4GLs which were in practice in those days. All new things which were very good, very, very progressive as well in those days, and very, very rewarding as well. It took me a little bit of time, but mastered it. Then I was in the US for quite some time in those days, and when I came back, I was thrust into a completely new area. We were venturing into Oracle in those days. Oracle was one of those systems, especially the forms and the database both were picking up steam. And we had a big project going on with one of the power companies, leading power companies in India. And well, we were all HP 3000 people who understood COBOL, the kind of languages which were there in the network system. Nobody understood RDBMS at all in that company. So that's where I got again one more question asked of me whether would I take on that, and I happily went into it because I knew that this was something which would be very very futuristic in those days, and something which I could definitely put into my skill map as well. So I learned it in probably in a couple of weeks. I picked it up and started the project. Very demanding customer, but it was fun. Okay, because at the end of it we delivered. That's what mattered. Subsequently, I moved into an embedded systems arena. We were working for a telecom company. Again, very complicated job where we had to reverse engineer some thousands of lines of code which were originally written by Stanford graduates, PhDs, people with a very high engineering pedigree. And it was becoming unmaintainable. Therefore, they wanted to outsource it. And obviously, there was no documentation. So the first step was obviously reverse engineering. This was all assembler code, C code. We did that as well. We learned the whole nuances of how those code was written, what the domain was, and wrote documentation which helped us support that particular platform for quite a few years. Post that, I was thrust into the travel and hospitality space, again a domain which knew nothing about, but frankly picked up quite a lot. Post that, a BFSI practice was started by me again in Booster Infotech. So fundamentally, my whole journey has been moving into new arenas, changing the domain more or less practically every other year to a large extent, and learning a wide gamut of technologies as well. And at each juncture, it has been a very, very good learning for me in that sense that you are learning something new, okay, and you are absorbing the way certain industries work, which ultimately, if you look at it in today's era of digital transformation, it's those adjacencies which help you understand how to do something, right? You pick up what is being done somewhere else, but if you know why it was done or what the domain implications are, you're able to bring it more easily into what we are currently doing. So, a lot of things which kept flipping around for me. But I think, as you said before, the fundamental reason why I managed to do this is because I never was in the habit of saying no. Perhaps maybe I found it difficult, but maybe that is the reason it has helped me do what I do today, because today all those things which I worked on, all those technologies and all those domains are proving to be of immense value for me where I am today. Okay. Even the embedded experience is helping me because we are doing firmware for our products as well, which is helping us shape the next generation platform for us. So all that knowledge which we gain through those embedded projects is helping me immensely now in putting together the next solution for us. So all in all, it's been just, I feel like one of those potentiometers where you keep flipping a switch and move forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, again, some takeaways from my side. So a troubleshooter, and the typical habit of a troubleshooter is, whenever a problem is thrown up and you are looking for volunteers, like the first hand goes up.
Correct.
And that's like looking for challenges. So when you said you were a troubleshooter, I myself wrote there, like raising your hands up, and then you finally said it, that like you never said no, you were always looking for challenges. um, but then I think unlearning and learning from HP 3000 to Oracle, sometimes we get married to a particular domain, technology, skill, and we say that I am this. We start identifying ourselves with this, with a particular thing. which I think you avoided. You kept taking up new challenges, new industries, whether travel and hospitality or BFSI, or coming from energy industry. So didn't really lock up or brand yourself into a particular one. Now, there's always a debate about specialization versus specialist versus generalist. And what I see here, Suresh, is probably that the debate is not that relevant, because I think whenever you are doing each of these technology stints, you were a specialist in that. You were learning it, you were going deep into it, and you are specializing in it. But you are not married to it for a long term, and you are always learning some new skills. And end of the day, when you see here, you are a generalist, but being a specialist in different areas in different time. And I think another very important things, like that like for example, embedded, coming back to you as IoT in its new avatar,
Right.
always helps, right? So
Absolutely.
what you learn today may come to help you, maybe day after tomorrow, or like many days after
Yeah,
tomorrow,
yeah.
right?
Absolutely. See, without that, I don't think I would have put in place some of the solutions which we did, okay? Because it would have been very difficult for us to understand or even select the right one for that matter, or even, put the right steps into play. So, yes, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So Suresh, before we move on to your CIO stint, um, I want to pick your brains a little bit on your leadership stint, the second stint, when you were a leader, both from a delivery and marketing point of view. So, what is your philosophy of building strong relationships with your clients, and building a culture of outcomes?
Well, see, I think it took me a while to understand this. To be honest, okay, it's not like it was right there from the start. But frankly speaking, I think it was somewhere simmering there, but it finally came to the fore during the stint where well, you have to see the philosophy is very simple. You have to see things like your customer sees it. Okay. And if you do it in that fashion, then things become different. And when you put yourself in the shoes, whether it's and when you see it from a customer standpoint, his universe also is important, right? It's his universe of customers, his dealers, maybe his vendors, his partners. You have to, or his employees, his managers, they all become various sub entities in that view. And that is where you need to start developing the ability to look at the situation from that lens and assessing it from all these sub entity levels also. So when you do that, many things look different. Okay. And I put this into practice in one of my engagements where I was the relationship manager. It was actually an offshore delivery management role. And for this was a leading insurance and brokerage firm in the US. When I put this practice into play, I was able to produce a 50% growth in the business. Okay. Now that was quite a good growth in those days, especially when you do it in the span of 1 year. Okay. And here, when I started looking at it in that fashion, I was able to understand what my customer wanted. And I was putting into play every single thing which he looked for. And because of which, he started trusting me. Okay. And he started believing that whatever I was doing was in his interest. And therefore, he supported me in that, which created a very synergetic relationship with him. So, when you have that kind of a relationship and that kind of a trust, then things move forward pretty quickly. And that is what one tries to try and do always. You have to do what is right for them. You have to do it what is in their interest and what works for them. You have When you do all these things and you got them on your side, then everything becomes simple later on. You actually get to do a few things out of your own volition as well in that context, because nobody is going to really come and say no to you, because you have made it a point that, or you've proven to them that you are working in their interest, and that's all that is needed. So this is what I try to do day in and day out, trying to put myself in their shoes and looking at that situation. And that is what gives us certain perspectives which otherwise we may have missed when we do any implementation. So that is the way. That is a key thing in that. In today's context, I think it's especially key because digital is different from what we used to do earlier, right? Digital is about putting in play a technology which is of use to the business. Earlier, it was more about process automation or process mapping, which was different. Processes were there, you just had to put in place a configuration around a solution and implement it. But today you got many technologies. You got analytics, you got RPA, you got bots, you got mobile apps, you got so many things coming in. It's a question of how you apply them for that business. And when you see it from his eyes, you can then bring all these things to bear, which otherwise a manager or a particular functional person may not easily see. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
you play the role of that catalyst for him then.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, just to recap it, there is just one, mantra for success, which is look at things from the customer's point of view. I'll share, one small discussion that I had with one of the guys who was looking for some mentoring. He was really stressed out, and it was basically that there were these multiple service lines in a company, and multiple people going to the customer, and he was like that, hey, you know what, this other guy, he is like talking to the customer and gathering requirements for everyone, and my FaceTime with the customer is gone. And I said, but what does the customer feel? Was the customer happy dealing with two people, or is the customer happy now dealing with one person? So if someone is proactively doing it, why be selfish and look at it from your point of view, and start getting anxious about it? Why not collaborate and say that, okay, yeah, it's good for the customer, let's align.
Hmm.
So, as I said, that's the only mantra for success. Then I
True.
think the another important thing that you mentioned, Suresh, is the customer is not just the customer. There's an ecosystem of the customer. There are other people who are serving him. There are other stakeholders, other service providers, and you need to sort of look around as to how the entire ecosystem is working and see where you can enable it. And like for example, in automobiles, initially when we had started in Tata Motors, the CRM, we were looking only at the dealers. But once the dealer ecosystem was completely connected and all, we said, hey, there are so many other people. There are mechanics out there, there are spare parts retailers out there, and these are not formal channel partners, right? And then you basically then start expanding to meet that ecosystem, because it's serving the customer. That's your vehicle. Um, yeah, the other thing is do what's right for the customer. That will build a trust with the customer. Whatever works for them, whatever is right for them. And I think you mentioned something very, very important, which I tell most of my mentees, is be proactive. Do things. If a customer asked you something and you did it, what's the fun in it? If you did something that the
Correct.
customer didn't ask, that's where the delight is. You mentioned it so matter of factly. I just thought I need to bring it out, that do things
Yeah,
out
and
of
you're
your
absolutely
own.
right. I think that is what creates a lot of difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'll repeat Suresh's words. He said, do things out of your own volition, which is being proactive, right? And I think the other thing that you mentioned was that all these technologies that are coming play. Earlier, it was about process mapping and process automation, but I think what digital transformation is all about is basically reshaping your customer experience, and then working
Correct.
backwards to how you stitch different processes and technologies to deliver that experience, right? I think it's a
Absolutely.
very, very important discussion, Suresh, and especially for the many people in our audience, who are from the IT services ecosystem, from products as well as services. So I think some really insights as well. Before I go forward to everyone in our audience, we keep evolving our ClariTeaChat process, and one of the things we are doing now onwards is to gather your feedback. So Sumit has just put out the link for a form out there, which is a survey form. So please open it in another window, and maybe as we are going through the chat, whenever you get some time, please fill up this survey. We would really love to hear your feedback. There are questions about we are reviewing which date times are good for you, because when we started it on a Saturday evening earlier, there was pandemic and there were lockdowns and everyone was logged into you know and actually the clarity chat made the weekends a little better. but I'm feeling the pressure from my family that your weekends are logged, and I'm sure many of you do the same, including our guests. So do give feedback about that. Plus, there are other questions around there. Plus, there are, like, some questions to know you better as to as to what you do, where you come from, etc., etc. Please do answer these, and especially to all of those who are listening to the recording of this session. Please do check out that form and fill it up, right?
I think we are waiting for Jagdish to come back online. As he mentioned, he was having some challenges initially, so we'll just wait for him.
Hello, hello. So Vinay this side. I think there was some issue with the network connection with Jagdish sir. So
Yeah,
I'll bring up the next question onto the screen. So we would request you to share your insights on that.
sure. Okay. So this is where perhaps I think I need to go back a few years. It was in 2015 when I was the CIO for Blue Star, and we were pretty much put everything or got everything stabilized to a large extent. Hey Jagdish, you're back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Plus, please continue. I know Vinay asked you a question. That's our backup
Yeah,
question.
so we put it up in the box there. So let me go ahead and do that. So fundamentally, what happened that time was we pretty much had a ERP in place. We had a few critical applications in place. The infrastructure was in place. Everything was working nicely, and we thought we were done. Okay, and that is when a lot of seminars and presentations and marketing events were happening around the subject of SMAC. I'm sure most of you would have heard it. Social media analytics, cloud, mobility, right? And frankly speaking, in those days, I tried as hard as I tried. I could never ever figure out how to put those technologies into place in Booster, and that is where I was challenged with the task of figuring out how do we bring those things in to the company's digital umbrella. So that started a very different journey for me. Okay, and this made me go very deep into our operations. I went to each business unit. I went to R&D. I went to service. I went to sales, logistics. I went to our dealers. I went to our vendors. Went to some of our service technicians. Met all of them. Tried to understand what was happening, what the challenges were, what the pain points were, what they were wanting, what their customers were saying. Even spoke to a lot of our customers as well in this process to get a good handle on what their expectations were. And that is where, for me, that was a very rewarding and enriching experience because it taught me a lot about the company's how the company's services and operations were being looked at even from the outside. Okay, and what our internal people were also thinking about. And the moment I did that, and when I put it all together in a document, that's when it sort of started taking shape for me in terms of how we could get all those new age technologies and IoT into the company. And that started a journey which, as said, which we are still going on very strong. There are still many things to be done, but we started putting into play a number of things which allowed us to. Well, the process was very simple. First, we focused on connecting the enterprise, which was making sure that all parts of the company were operating on systems and data was moving through the functions without having to be created again, and it was being used. That was the first step. And then we moved outside, which is our ecosystem consisting of vendors, dealers, even our customers to a large extent. And we started putting into place other technology solutions around that area, which allowed us to connect our systems to other external partners as well. And this is how we managed to do both. And then we got our products also connected. That was the third step. All of this was where we put in place mobile applications, we put in place analytics applications, we have RPA going. We also experimented with IoT, and today IoT is becoming a very, very significant part of our technology implementations. So we had rolled out an IoT based solution to monitor all our chillers pan India. So we got some 500 critical customers on it. It's not been a full rollout yet, but we started that as a pilot to try and figure out to what extent we can leverage it. And today we are in the verge of actually reinventing that whole thing, where we have also put in place a number of AI ML solutions around it, which allows us to predict problems as well. So that's where that thing is going. But frankly speaking, those technologies which we put in place, I think we also did a lot of thinking in terms of how what we would need and whether they would be of significant, what kind of significance they would bring. So a simple mobile app for a service technicians, well, not only did it help us to improve our service turnaround time, but more importantly, we had a different effect where our revenue generation was faster. Okay, because there's a lot of activities associated around the act of a preventive maintenance, and which culminates in a billing to be done. Earlier, it all used to be paper based, and by the time a paper comes back to the company on the basis of which a billing could be done, it would take some time, right? But moment you have a mobile app out there doing everything, the data is back, and you're able to immediately, create your invoices and even close some of those issues which were around that. So it helped us move into a paperless service operation as well. Today, we are very much into that, and we're further utilizing more and more pieces around it. All in all, a challenge thrown up resulted in a whole lot of solutions being put in place, but more importantly, an understanding of the business. We also went and created a very futuristic platform for our products, which is fundamentally today, if I want to, we can roll out features over the air. Okay, for some of our critical products, especially in the retail space. Now, this is a typical Tesla like experience which we can offer as well. And tomorrow, this particular capability can actually help us do a whole lot more. It's a start of something, it's a base for us to build on, and I'm very, very confident that we can put it to a lot of use. And tomorrow, a lot of services can also be done around it, a lot of analytics can be driven out of it, and we can do more value additions to our customers in the process. And more importantly, perhaps we can offer different business models as well. So that's the whole thing around this particular question, where we focused on building a lot of technology solutions to help our businesses and creating a digital fabric for ourselves. Jagdish, you back?
Yeah. I just unmuted myself. So again, my takeaways from this discussion, Suresh. Very importantly, I'm like really glad that you didn't start with technology itself, right? I think the starting point was going around the business, going to each and every function, going to your dealers, talking to your customers, and then developing a sort of your own viewpoint on what are the problems to be solved, what are the outcomes to be achieved, and then starting out with the technology and then prioritization and all. I really loved that case study about the mechanic mobile app, which is like while it is about the service turnaround time, can it be faster, can it be real time, but there are so many other byproducts of it in terms of making it a digital paperless process, as well as the revenue turnaround times getting faster, etc. I mean, a great I would say journey that you have enumerated, Suresh. Meanwhile, to all the audience, I would request you to please send in your questions to Suresh. As I got disconnected, I lost all the previous comments and questions. So, Vinay, if there are any questions we have, can you bring it up? I see one question from Amarinder. So Amrinder is asking, Suresh, please share your thoughts on this rise of D2C brands in India, especially in the consumer electronics segment.
I presume D2C is direct to customer, right?
Direct to customer, yeah.
It's a well, it's something which is of very much interest to us. And frankly speaking, that's the next step for us in terms of how we can further develop our capabilities in that area and be able to reach out to consumers more and more. But at this point, I'm not able to offer more information on that because that's still something which the businesses are working on. But Amarinder, happy to connect with you at some point in time in the near future, and I'll personally be able to I personally give you a lot of info on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me then go on to the next question.
Sir, apologize again because of disconnectivity. Sir, I have added one more question onto the screen. I would request you to, to take the session forward and keep sharing your valuable insights. Thank you.
The answer to this is very simple, to be honest. Frankly speaking, this is an area which I've still not even, which I've not considered at all. Okay, to be honest, and I certainly am not going to be able to debate on it because it's quite a good subject to think about. But at the same time, I would rather first look at it from a business standpoint before I offer any opinion, because that is the way I look at it. And since I'm not able to connect it yet, I would rather withhold my opinion for now, if you don't mind. That was Nikhil, right? Hey, Nikhil. Okay, I think the question is, adoption and change management are always a challenge. Take us through an example of driving technology adoption and what are the lessons and learnings. Yeah, I think this is a very critical question. This is something which affects all of us. I'm sure many of us would have faced this where we put in place a technology solution. I think Jagdish has come back. Jagdish, I think I can see a question there which I'm in the process of responding.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, yeah, yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah.
So, so this is something which I'm sure all of us would have faced. We would have put in place a solution only to see it not being used, people not adopting it, people getting challenged with it, people resisting it. This is a very common phenomenon. Okay, and this is something which we also faced, and especially during the initial stages. And we did do a strong analysis of why these things, because for us adoption was key. One of the things which I should have perhaps mentioned is budget is always something which is hard to come by. You have to get the max out of it, and max out of it is not about utilizing it but generating the value of it. Okay, and for us, even delivering one failed project was something which was very, you know, we didn't want it. It was something which we really hated. Okay, and therefore any failed project or any project which was faltering and not being used would become a major concern area for us. So we did have a couple of these, and we started looking at to what exactly that were the reasons for it. And it was something quite interesting which we found. One thing is, were we providing the were we answering the right problem, or were we providing the solution to the right problem? Basically, the identification of the problem itself may have been an issue. Second thing which we found is the criticality of the problem. Is it something which the businesses are having a huge issue in? Is something which they really need to fix? And is it a very burning issue? And the third is the timing of the problem. Is it something which they're facing now? Is it something which is hurting them now and therefore they are desperate to fix it? If these three conditions are looked at, then if you examine these three things in its right light, you'll perhaps find an answer as to how to improve adoption. So if the timing is now, the criticality is high, where the pressure is high and there's a desperation around it, and you find the right problem, your adoption rate will go up significantly. we revised our development methodologies, and we also did something else. We adopted something called as design thinking, which I'm sure most of you are familiar of with, but we adapted it to our needs. Okay, and we have actually various flavors of design thinking operating within our premises depending upon the nature of projects. In some cases, we may take only parts of it. In some cases, we may go through the whole process. But what we have learned is there are two or three parts to it which are very critical for us. So we definitely do those three things. Plus, we do a lot of prioritization within whenever we get a request from anybody. The prioritization looks at the timing of the issue, or rather, is it burning issue, and the criticality, is it of burning need within that particular department. Accordingly, we prioritize something. So if it is answer to these questions now and high, then it's priority one. Anything else will be priority two or priority three, depending upon the magnitude of this problem. Moment we started looking at it like this, we suddenly started seeing a very high adoption rate. Okay, whatever we put in was utilized immediately, and we started getting more and more inputs from those businesses for further enhancements, which was actually creating a very vibrant kind of a relationship, because that's what needs to happen. If you're not getting any changes from your customers, it fundamentally means that nothing is happening out there. Second thing is design thinking helped us do something else. We had one example which I would like to use here is that of a Salesforce automation solution. I'm sure many of you, especially in the IT service industry, would also have experimented with a Salesforce automation and would have probably struggled. I've struggled. I've done seven such things in my past, including in my IT service era, and I've never been able to successfully do any one of them. Here also I had a similar experience. I thought it would be different on the end user side, but well, it was partly yes and partly no. Some departments were using it, but some departments for which we really wanted usage, we were seeing a very low adoption. And when we went deep into it and we applied design thinking to this, we realized something, that we were not solving the right problem, and nor were we tracking the right stakeholders. Salesforce automation is typically seen as a sales pipeline visibility kind of a problem, where your sales managers are interested in knowing what the sales pipeline is, but the guy below, the one who's actually going to point in the information for you to view for the manager to view the sales pipeline, is a real guy whom we need to track. Are we solving his problem? His problem could be something else. And when you look at it as any Salesforce automation, if you implement it as is, you're only solving one tenth of that guy's problem. There are remaining nine areas which potentially is doing outside the system, and that is what prevents him from coming back to your system, because you're not solved his pain holistically. So when we went into that particular area where this particular implementation had failed, we went down, we started walking the talk with the sales guys. We actually used to accompany them on the sales calls. We found out what they were doing, and because of which we suddenly found there were so many things which those guys were doing which we had not mapped into the Salesforce automation. And when we did that, we relaunched it as what we call as my sales organizer, which actually addresses the pain points of those guys in its entirety. They don't need to do anything outside the system. They used to use emails, Excels, PowerPoints all outside using their own storage mechanisms, but everything now happens through the system. They can track every single client interaction here. They know what they have sent when, they know what has been sent. Because of which, they don't need to worry about trying to remember what they did last, or even going through a mailbox to find out what has happened. Everything's out there at the click of a button. Because of this, our adoption, and we designed this with the help of them. We made them part of the design team. Because of which, on day one when it launched, day two we saw everybody's sales history coming up there, and we have never looked back since then. It is one of the most widely used systems within our platform, and we replicate it again for other departments. Same method, same formula, and we continue to adopt these techniques in all our other implementations, especially those which are digital in nature. When it comes to ERP and other things, we still go back to our older ways, because that's a little bit more of process automation involved there rather than digital. But when it comes to a digital implementation, we have mandated it, and thanks to my team who are very good at this, they have honed it down to a T, and we are able to practice it very, very diligently. And we are seeing a very good adoption rate, and therefore a good return as well.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think Suresh talked about design thinking. I think at the foundation of design thinking is starting with the customer. So I think the traditional IT that we used to do was like more top-down driven. Where you would say that, okay, hey, I want these information, these reports, and then like I want to
Correct.
automate this process, reduce manpower here and all. and thereby, like, we would and therefore adoption was always a challenge. Now, the moment you start from the customer's point of view, as Suresh rightly said, bring them into the room, design it with them, understand their problems, and then and then you start your work. There's no way that they will not use it. The only thing is that while the methodology has been there, it's very difficult to break those old barriers of thinking that start with the customer.
Correct.
This recently happened with me, Suresh. So I'm mentoring a CRM program where we did the initial headquarter I would say discussions and all of that, and then I said no. I mean, we cannot go ahead unless we have talked to the actual salespeople out there. So we organized another discussion, with salespeople from different geographies, brought them into a Teams meeting. One, validated everything that we had figured out thus far, and then asked them, like, what are your big pain points, from information point of view, in terms of committing to customers, in terms of, when customers ask you questions, what information do you struggle for? And I think the program is richer with those inputs. I think the other takeaway that I have, Suresh, from what you shared is prioritization, right? If many times these programs are driven from the headquarters, to meet some leaders, like, aspiration, whether it's a real big problem out there or not. So, validating it, making sure that, that this is something that is required, and putting it through certain filters, it always helps in driving that option. Do what's
Absolutely.
needed. Do what's needed badly.
Absolutely, Jagdish. See, we typically, well, this is what we used to do. We used to, as you said, something used to come from one of those places, and we used to take it up. The other way is, we used to hear about something happening in some other company, and we used to take it up. Or maybe it's an interesting technology which has come your way, you want to use it, so you start doing things. But we stopped doing
Absolutely.
that. See, you have to be ready for the technology. Your users have to be ready for the technology as well. If both conditions are not met, then you're not going to be able to ensure that it's going to sustain itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Suresh, before I go to, we are like just about the end of the hour, so we'll probably take another 5-7 minutes to wrap up. But just maybe one question. So we have to start the rapid fire round now. And here is, one question which has come from Hrishikesh Bhingardive from Mumbai. He's asking how to ensure data protection when 70% of the Indian firms have been hit by ransomware attacks. Maybe a quick answer. I know it's a huge subject, but maybe a very quick answer in terms of just the philosophy or a principle that you want to
Yeah,
apply here.
sure. I see. It's very simple. The weakest link is always the person or the people.
Absolutely,
And you may have put in all the tools, you may have put in all the systems, controls, all that is fine. But you have to focus your energies on addressing this particular entity called people, okay, which is employees, which is everybody involved and using your systems or who's connected with you through mails or whatever. You have to make sure they understand what is security or what is information security about, how they can safeguard themselves, what are the things they can do and cannot do. So very strong attention is from our side is now focused on that. So we run a lot of campaigns, we run a lot of training programs just focused on, and even simulations to that extent, which allows us to gauge the response and see what corrective actions we need to take. It's become a very, very key part of what we do today. Okay, and earlier never, I don't think people focus on that as a subject, but for us it's become a pretty hot topic which I think we should address universally as well, because the more the people get educated, the better off every single company will be. And frankly speaking, I don't think the people at the ground level may be that savvy with technology as one would think. Okay, even though they may have used it at personal levels, they still are susceptible to a lot of those smart hacking which comes their way once in a while. You can hear about it even with experienced people, you're reading about it in newspapers. So you have to focus your energies on honing their skills and making them more aware
absolutely,
and learn how to manage these things.
absolutely. And like, uh, for example, the social engineering, right?
Absolutely.
Somebody getting a mail from the CEO about releasing a payment, and it actually happened that that people have done that. Okay, so let's move to the concluding part of our chat, which is the rapid fire round. So while I have my own rapid fire questions for Suresh, to every one of you in the audience, if you have any curiosities about Suresh, his favorite movie star, what book, what is his favorite book, etc., 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 please feel free to ask, and I'll bring up that question and invite Suresh to answer it. So while you bring up your questions for rapid fire, let me start with my rapid fire questions. So, Suresh, I did hear some reference in some comment, but what was your own unique way of exercising in childhood?
Oh
Did you
well.
mention?
We- Well, as I mentioned, I used to stay in the small flat, right? It was on the second floor, and water, water in that building never used to come up to our house. I mean, we didn't have the luxury of opening a tap up and water would come. So, and the supply was restricted to a few hours. So the only way we could ever use water is by storing it, and the only way to store it is to draw the water up, and the only way to do it was to use hand pumps. So we had installed a hand pump in our house, and that was my exercise as well as my must do, because without that there was no water the next day. So I used to spend an hour or two just pumping water in buckets till I could fill some of the storage drums, and it became a very good exercise routine as well. And thankfully, at least that was there, because as I said before, we didn't have the luxuries of many things, and gym definitely was not there on the
Yeah.
cards.
So I want to share something that resonates with my childhood. So I was in this place called Almora, and again there was no tap water supply, but there was a natural spring which was always flowing 24 hours. It was flowing. It was used to be called Sinari Nala, and it would flow like really big. Okay, so it would fill a 5 liter can in probably like 20 seconds. Okay, so every evening as we were playing outside, everyone's mom will call and all the kids will rush back. We'll have these two 5 liter cans in our hand, and we would all be racing to Sinari Nola and filling those water cans, bring it back, fill the drum. And this used to be done in such a fun way that we are racing against each other. Who reaches there first, who gets back first, how many did we fill up today, etc., etc. Well, it was hard work, but made fun, with the
You know,
energy of our childhood.
when you were saying this, I sort of was thinking about that movie 36 Chamber of Shaolin.
Ah, yeah.
They used to do that for an
Absolutely.
exercise there.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, Suresh, you heard about letter bomb. So you received a letter bomb as soon as you became a CIO. What was that?
Well, first day of taking on that role, my mail, and there was this audit letter from one of the publishers. Never seen one before in my life. Didn't know the clue as to what was to be done. Didn't know what was the situation as well. So it was fun. It was
Okay.
stressful, but it was something
But
which, well, as I said, one more area to learn.
some of the rapid fires I pick up, which resonate in my experience. So it exactly happened with me. I took I took over as CIO on I think around 9th or 10th of March in 2009, and I think within a week I got a similar love letter. I used to call these love letters, and my way of responding was to send them an angry email saying that March is our month end, year end, the most stressful time for business and IT, and how dare you be so insensitive to be sending such a mail at such a time. We never heard back.
And you know what? The day was also my birthday. So happy birthday to
Yeah,
me.
happy birthday gift. Okay, so I think you mentioned you answered this question, but just in a rapid fire manner, one, two, three, Suresh, I want to ask you. There's a huge demand for technology projects. What is your prioritization formula? One, two, three.
As I said, impact, the
Hmm.
actual impact which one could estimate, the time to impact, and whether it affects profitability, or whether it affects revenue, or whether it's just affecting productivity. So each of these result in a different priority, and accordingly we manage our resources.
Very important. impact, time to impact, and the value of that impact, right?
Correct.
Okay, so Suresh, early in your life, you had traveled through many countries. Which country impressed you the most, or which country you had the biggest of the learnings?
I think I spent a significant time in the US. So for me, US perhaps has given me a lot of exposures to all the various industries which I worked on has been in US. And frankly speaking, I think I hope that a lot.
Okay, okay, no, that's great. That's great. Okay, next question. Uh, you interact with a lot of business leaders, and everyone brings in different attitudes to use leveraging or leveraging your department as a technology provider. Now, when you look at the best of them, so what are a couple of attributes you can pick up, which you can say that, okay, these are the two three things that business leaders do really well, as to become to lead the digital business.
Well, I think, as I said before, we are in digitalization, which is different from automation. Digitalization does require the congruence of business plus technology. Okay, it's only when these
Absolutely.
two are known to that person, then you get the best out of it. So the
Absolutely.
business leaders who actually take steps to be part of this initiatives which they're driving, who are getting deeper into it, who participate in it, I think they are the ones who are getting the max out of whatever implementations are happening, as compared to somebody who may be just handing it off to us as managers or whatever, but then it never meets the expectations at the end of it, and that's where things start going wrong again. So, and of course the leader knows best for what's needed for his business, because he's got a more holistic view, whereas the people below may have a more narrower view, because they may be more specific to a certain area and may not have a knowledge of the whole as its general principles. So the guy who's going to be part of it, who embraces it, works with it, I think they will probably be the best in the years to come.
Absolutely. I think you said it well. Lead it. Don't try to manage it.
Correct.
So you have to indulge. You have to engage, and you really have to get deep. Your hands dirty, even though it's technology, and not just think that, like, not just be an order giver to technology, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, what's your
You
most
know what,
invaluable?
Jagdish, you know what? I'm seeing a lot of that happening in my company, which is perhaps increasing our adoption as well, okay, and the value, because that's how things can get done faster. In fact, I'm seeing some leaders wanting to have further discussions on what more could be done, how it could be leveraged further, which never used to happen before, but lately we are seeing a lot of it. So good, it's a very encouraging sign.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I agree with you. In my own experience, also, the people, the departments where we could make the most impact was where the leader was engaged, where um, the leader made us as technology team make they made us feel as part of their team. When they had sort of a gathering, they invited us to be part of that. When they had some sort of large gathering with presentation, they made technology people make a presentation. When they did recognitions, they recognized technology people. So a lot of things to make the technology team feel part of their own operations and function, and not just take an arm's length approach. Okay, so here we have another rapid fire question from Amrinder. So he's asking, which book or movie had a deep impact on you?
Well, good question. Frankly speaking, I'm struggling for an answer on this one. But off late, I think there's a series of books which has been written called The Future of War. Okay, it's actually fiction. I love fiction books more so than any other books. So I read a lot of it. And this series of books, there's some 6 or 7 of them. It actually talks about how future wars will be fought, what kind of future weaponry will be used. It's astounding. I mean, it's scary as well, but it's pretty astounding in terms of how this author has utilized certain concepts such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, uh, drones, your nanotechnology, and woven together into a thriller novel where he brings all of it into play. I mean, it's amazing and it's very gripping reading. Okay, you will really enjoy it as well. At the same time, it will make make you start asking certain questions. Can I use this for something within what I'm doing? And that is why it's perhaps even more interesting. So I think that's what ranks for me. In fact, that is what I've been there for a long time now, for quite a few years, because it's very interesting, those books.
Oh, that's great. So you called it the future of wars.
Yeah, it's a future. I think it's called The Future of War. It's been, as I said, a couple of years since I read it. But there
Okay.
is a number of novels around it, typically revolving around the major nations fighting certain wars. But the technology which is being demonstrated there, I mean, if that becomes a reality, and I think it will, because it's not so far fetched in that sense. But then it can make things very, very look very different.
Okay. Okay. That's great. That's great. That's great. So, and maybe my last question to you, Suresh.
Yeah.
Um, what's your most invaluable asset?
Well, as I said, books for me are something which I've been reading all my life, right from my childhood days, and I managed to accumulate every single book which I've read in the past 25 to 30 years. So I've got this huge collection of books in my house, which occupies a lot of space, much to my wife's chagrin. She doesn't like to see so many books because it's there. And these days I'm on Kindle, which offends her even more because it's still sitting there. But these are some of the best books which I've ever read, and I never want to let go of it, which is why I still keep it. But maybe I may reconsider. But for me, that's my asset. But I love going back to it every once in a while. And some of these books I can't even find anymore. So, all in all, something which I cherish. And books will always be
Uh,
something which you can cherish.
yeah, no, I think the same thing with me. And for the last 5 6 years that we were moving around from Mumbai to Bangalore, then Bangalore back to Mumbai, then Mumbai to Pune, and all that. We had like a huge set of cartons, piled up, which never got opened. And one of the criteria or parameter of settling down was to find a home for these books. So my wife actually, and this became my wife's pet project, that she took one of the big walls, and she got a carpenter to build a complete wall to wall, almost like 8 feet height bookshelf
Wow.
for me with a small working table, and then she herself organized all our books there, even though that's turning out to be insufficient. But again,
Hmm.
something that resonates with you, Suresh. Yeah,
Yeah,
let's sometimes look at each other's collection. Yeah,
but very difficult to maintain them because
absolutely,
they
absolutely, very difficult to maintain.
age, right? That's the problem.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Like we
Yeah,
all do, by the way.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, Suresh. So before we end the chat, any question from you to me?
Yeah, you mentioned this is your 66th, you said, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, well, I've got a question for you. How do you keep doing it? How have you managed to reach this level? Because and doing this every Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. I'm impressed, buddy. How do you manage this? What keeps you going?
No, so one is of course, Suresh, when I do these chats, there's a prep chat in the a week before that we do, and I think that's where that's what I call it, the looking at the iceberg fully. So we all look at each other as the 10% of what we are, but when we do these prep chats, you really see the full iceberg right from the point where it started, the childhood and all of that. So knowing my fellow CIOs, connecting at a much deeper level with them, and understanding what they have, a lot of what they have been doing, and what the philosophies are resonates with with what I do. So that's one purpose. That's one thing that keeps us going on a week on week basis. But I think at a more fundamental level, it took us a lot of time to think through why we should do it. Is it like just to be visible out there every week, or is there a larger purpose? So we first defined the purpose a little more better, which is the video that we see in the beginning.
Hmm.
And I think it's that purpose which drives us on. So whenever I look at any kind of statistic around the rate of failures of technology implementations, that just reminds me that what we are doing has some use for the community, on both sides, by the way.
Sure. Great.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Thanks, Suresh, for that question. And just to remind everyone out there, who's watching it live or who's watching the recording, please give us your feedback. Sumit has again posted the survey link. Um, we would love to hear about your experience and, like, what you would want us to improve in it. What you like, what you don't like, etc., etc. So please give your feedback. We're keen to hear from you. So let's close the session now. So let me start by thanking all our audience for attending and engaging. And thank you, all of you who are watching the recording as well. This weekend, please enjoy your remaining family time. And yeah, do spend, whenever you get some time, do watch Clarity Chat. We also have, we are also converting it into different other formats like the audio as well as the newsletter format. So please subscribe to the podcast uh, version as well as the newsletters. And before I end, thank you, Suresh, for joining me on the Clarity Chat today. It's been a phenomenal session, great learnings. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jagdish. You are always phenomenal. From the moment I heard about you a few years back, if you remember that incident when I said I want to come over to Tata Motors and see what is happening, so I still recollect that. So thank you so much for being a part of my circle.
Hey, thank you so much, Suresh. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye. Have a
Bye
great
bye.
weekend.